Hello and a big welcome back to the Wee Larder channel. Today I'm going to be making 4 delicious chicken recipes and we're going to be focusing on reducing our food waste in these recipes. So this video is actually brought to you in collaboration with Sustainable Kirriemuir, who are actually working hard in parts of Scotland to reduce food waste in the family home. And this recipe is going to use up all of our scraps, our vegetable scraps and our chicken carcass, and it just helps to reduce waste from one family roast chicken dinner. So in this video we're going to be making a delicious family roast chicken dinner, and this is my favourite way of making a roast chicken. It's so good and it's really easy to make as well. And we're then going to use the leftover meat to make a creamy delicious chicken pie. It's really nice. And we're then going to use the leftover carcass and any meat that's left on the legs and the wings for making a chicken broth, and that's going to be turned into a chicken and vegetable soup. So you're going to get some really nutritious, delicious and healthy recipes out of something that in a lot of family homes would just end up in the bin or the compost bin. So this is really going to help you save money, and you're going to get some extra meals out of one chicken dinner as well. So I hope this video inspires you to reuse your leftovers in creative ways. And you can also make the broth with things like beef, a beef roast, lamb, anything that's got like a bone in it works really well for making the broth. And you can also turn leftover meat from other leftover dinners into pies and soups as well. So get creative in the kitchen. I hope this is a good place to start with your inspiration for reducing food waste in your home. So first of all, we're going to get started on our traditional family roast chicken dinner. So for our first recipe for our roast chicken dinner, you're going to need a whole chicken. So just buy the best quality that you can afford, and you want a medium to large size of chicken as well. A selection of vegetables for roasting underneath the chicken. So my favourite vegetables to use are carrots, potatoes, onions, garlic. But you can also use things like courgette, red peppers, broccoli. You can also put some greens in there as well, and just use whatever you have available in your fridge. I've actually put a little bit of courgette in this recipe when I cooked it here, because I had a piece left in the fridge that was left over from another meal, so I just popped that in there as well. And I've chopped them up quite chunky as well, and we're using some olive oil and salt and pepper for drizzling over the vegetables too. So we're going to start by setting our oven to about 180. So that's a fan oven that I am using. So you might need a little bit higher if you don't have a fan oven. And we're just going to drizzle a generous amount of olive oil into the bottom of a large roasting dish. And what we're going to do is just add all of our vegetables into our roasting dish there. So your dish might be a little bit bigger, might be a bit smaller, it doesn't really matter. So I don't have a specific quantity of vegetables here. You just need enough to cover the bottom of the dish, so just use as much as you need. And we're just going to stir that around so that it is coated in the olive oil, and we're going to add in our cloves of garlic. So I love garlic, so I've used quite a few cloves here. You can leave the garlic out if you don't like garlic, but it does add a really nice flavour to the broth when you're making the broth, so it's really good to add them for that. And we're just going to sprinkle that with salt and stir it around to season them well. And we're also going to add in some black pepper there too, and just give that a good stir around. So we want these seasoned really well, and they will get all the juices from the chicken when it's cooking, and they just turn out so delicious. They are really nice. And if you have leftover vegetables, you can keep them for your soup as well. So we're just going to pop our chicken on top of our bed of vegetables there. And all we're going to do is season this lightly and then pop it in the oven. So if you add a drizzle of olive oil on the top, you could also use butter if you want to. I like to use olive oil for mine. We're just going to season that with salt and pepper as well. So just give it a real generous amount of salt on the chicken. And this just helps to crisp up the skin as well. So it makes it nice and crispy on the top, because we love a bit of crispy skin on our chicken, and we're just adding some black pepper in there as well. You could also add in some dried herbs if you have available in the cupboard. Rosemary works really nice, or you can use fresh herbs as well. And that is going to go in the oven for a total of about an hour and a half. It really does depend on the size of your chicken. So please check the back of your chicken packaging for the exact time that you need to cook yours for. So it's different for different sizes of chicken. So just make sure to check that. So what we're going to do is take it out halfway through the cooking time and just give the vegetables a really good stir, just so that they are getting roasted on all sides. Obviously, you're not going to be able to get to the vegetables underneath the chicken, but that is totally fine. Just stir away at the ones that you can see. And we're just going to pop that in for the remaining time. And when it is cooked, it should look something like this. So I like to carve in between the breast and the leg just to make sure that the juices are running clear. You can also use a thermometer if you know how to use that to check that it is cooked right through. And the juices are running nice and clear here, so that is perfectly cooked through. So we're just going to carve off some breast and leg and serve this up, and we're going to keep the leftovers aside. So I'm just carving up some breast here. My kids absolutely love the breast of chicken, so we always carve the breast off first. Sometimes we don't use the legs and we just keep the legs for the leftover type recipes. It really just does depend on what everybody wants. And when you are preparing your vegetables, peeling them, you want to make sure you keep all of your peelings, all the pieces that you've the ends that you've cut off your carrots or onions. You want to keep all of those in a bag and set them aside so that we can use them for making the broth as well. So we're not wasting any of our food scraps even when we're preparing our vegetables. So if you just serve up in the way that you want to serve up your chicken, we love to serve up with the vegetables that have been roasting underneath, and we're also adding some rice in here as well. You could add in some roast potatoes, mashed potatoes, stir-fried greens, some extra broccoli and carrots on the side maybe, just whatever you have available in your fridge. So you do get quite a lot of delicious juices at the bottom of this pan cooking it this way as well, and it just works really well for making a gravy. So you can make a gravy out of these juices, or you can just spoon them out and drizzle them over the chicken breast, because chicken breast can sometimes be a little bit dry, so it's good to use these juices as well. So I'm just adding a good dollop of rice on there too, and we're just going to drizzle that a little bit with the juices from the pan. So just try and not get the really fatty liquidy bits. You want the stuff from underneath. So we're going to drizzle that over. And that is our delicious roast chicken dinner served up, and we've just sprinkled some herbs that I had available on the top there as well. You don't have to do that, but if you have those available, go for that. And this also works really well with one of those Nando's sauce jars. You can drizzle that over the top as well and make yourself a delicious Nando's style meal. And there we have our lovely chicken roast dinner. So we're now going to move on to making the chicken pie. So this is the delicious leftover chicken pie that we like to make with a roast chicken dinner. So for this recipe, you're going to need your leftover chicken from your roast dinner. So the meat from the legs and the breast is absolutely fine. You can take the meat off the wings if you want to, but I like to just keep the smaller, fiddlier bits of meat for the soup. So you'll see that in the next recipe. So just take off what is easy to take off, and you can take the meat off from the underside of the chicken as well. So that's what we're going to need for this pie. And we're also going to need salt and pepper, a bag of frozen vegetables, 3 tablespoons of butter and 3 tablespoons of flour, and that's plain flour as well, some whole milk, approximately 1 litre. And you might also like to pop in some leftover herbs or greens that you might have lying around. You don't have to do that, but if you do have them, feel free to put them into the sauce. And we're also going to use a pre-made pack of puff pastry. If you want to be adventurous, feel free to make your own puff pastry. But just to make this recipe super easy, we are using a pre-made pack of pastry. So we're just going to take all the meat off our chicken and pop it into a large pie dish here. Now, if you don't have that much, you can use a smaller dish than this. If you find you don't have that much meat left over at all, you can also add in some chunky cooked potatoes or some mushrooms chopped up quite chunky, and that will give the pie a meaty texture. Or you could just add in extra vegetables and make it a delicious vegetable pie with a hint of chicken. So you don't have to have as much as I have here. You can just fill it out with however you like. And the leftover pieces of skin and bones and things, we just want to keep all of those to the side because we are going to use every single piece of this chicken in our broth recipe. So don't throw anything away from the chicken carcass itself. So these types of pieces, the bones and the skin, I know they don't look the prettiest of pieces, but they are going to be kept aside for our broth. So we're going to put that to the side and we're going to add all of our vegetables into a small pan now. So just to make this pie super easy, I have chosen frozen vegetables, and you can just use as much as you like. I probably have about 5 good handfuls in here. You can also use cooked vegetables, cooked fresh vegetables if you want to. You don't have to use the frozen vegetables, but I just find it makes it so much easier to make this pie just by popping these vegetables in. But if you have other vegetables available, feel free to use those instead. So we're just going to simmer those away and cook those for a couple of minutes. They really don't take long, and you don't want them too mushy, so don't overcook them because they will cook a little bit in the oven as well. So we're now going to add our butter and our flour into our pan to make our white sauce. So we're just going to blend our butter and our flour together to form a paste, and we're going to cook that for a minute or so in the pan. And then what we're going to do is add a very small amount of milk and just keep adding a very small amount, blending it through until it's smooth, and then add in another small amount of milk until you have a nice thick creamy sauce for the pie. So it does take a couple of minutes if you just keep blending away as well and adding in a little bit of milk. And all this time we've got the pan on a kind of low to medium heat, so it's not too high, not too low. Once we have the consistency that we're after, it should look something like this, and we're just going to season it with a little bit of salt. So I've used a good couple of sprinkles of salt here. And we're just blending that in again, adding a dash more milk just to thin it out a bit. So if you find it's getting too thick, just add in a little bit more milk. And we're just going to add in some herbs that I had lying around as well in the kitchen. I always seem to have these herbs that I buy from the supermarket. So to save them going to waste, I just pop them into anything that I am making. So I'm just popping them into this sauce here. And I also had some microgreens that I was needing to use up as well. So they're just basically very tiny broccoli seeds that have been growing, and they are just going to go in here as well. So I just needed to use those up. They're actually super nutritious as well. You don't need to add these herbs in though. Feel free to just make the sauce on its own if you want to, and you can also add in some dried herbs in here too if you want to add in some dried parsley or coriander or something would work really well in here. And we're just going to blend those through and add in a sprinkle of black pepper as well. And once we have the consistency we're after, it should be something like this. If you find it's getting a little bit too thick, feel free to add a bit more milk in just to thin it out a bit more. And we're just going to set that to the side, and it should look something like this when it is ready. So it is quite a thick sauce that we are after for this pie. So if we just stir that through, turn the heat off, and then we are going to drain our vegetables and add them into the chicken. So I'm actually also just using some scissors here as well, just to cut the chicken up a little bit, because I'm feeding mine to lots of little people in the house, so we like to keep the bits quite small. You can leave it chunky if you want to, you don't have to do this. And we're just going to add in our vegetables, which we have drained as well. So we're going to put all of our vegetables in. So just put in enough to fill up your dish. You really want to have your dish quite full by this point. And you can add in your mushrooms if you want to as well, and some cooked potatoes if you feel you need to fill it out a little bit more. So I've just seasoned it with a bit more salt here just for the vegetables. We're just going to pour in all of our sauce. And if you're using a different size of dish, you might need a little bit less, might need a little bit more sauce, but we really want to have a good quantity of sauce in there because it is going into the oven again, so we don't want to dry it out at all. So if you just pour in all of the sauce into the pie, and we're just going to give it a really good stir around. And if we just flatten it out a little bit on the top, just so that it is ready for the pastry to go on top. So as I said before, I'm just using a pack of pre-made pastry. And if you are feeling adventurous, you can make your own if you want to. But it's just so easy just to roll this out on the paper and pop it over the top of the dish like this. Now my dish was slightly larger than this pastry, so I've just basically pulled it out and stretched it a little bit to go over the top. So if you need to do that, then just go ahead and do that. You could also roll it out to make it a little bit wider, but I find it's quite stretchy, so it does go over the top. So you want it to kind of go over the edge of your pie dish, and then we're just going to push it down in the middle here into the pie itself. So you just push it down into the edges like this. And just kind of pop it over the top of the pie dish, and then we're just going to take a sharp knife and cut off any extra. And we're not going to waste those extra pieces of pastry. We're going to decorate it up all lovely and pretty with some flowers. You can decorate it in any way that you want to, but there is quite a chunk of pastry left over from carving off the edges of this pie dish, as you can see here. So there's no point in throwing this in the bin. We can make something for the top of the pie. So you just want to run a fork around the top of the pie as well, just to push it down onto the edge of your pie dish. If you don't have an edge on your dish, just make sure you're putting the pastry over the edge so that it doesn't fall off. So as I said, we do have quite a lot left over here, so we're just going to make some little shapes and pop it on the top. So I'm not going to show you how to do that. It's just, you can basically just make whatever you want. So we're just going to pop a couple of holes in the top here as well, just so that any steam can come out. So I just made some flowers with my excess pastry. And we're just brushing a tiny amount of milk over the top of the pie. You can also brush over a little bit of beaten egg if you want to. I just like to use some milk. And yes, I've lost my pastry brush, so I'm actually just using my hands here, but that is totally fine. You can get away with that. So it should look something like this when it is ready to go in the oven. So we're going to pop it in the oven for 25 to 30 minutes at 160, and when it's ready it should look something like this. So it's nice and puffed up and it's lovely and brown on the top, and everything is obviously cooked inside of the pie, so it's basically just to help the pastry rise. So it might take a little bit less than half an hour, so just make sure to check it, and especially check that it's not burning on the top as well. And then just serve it up with whatever you want to serve it up with. It also works really well with some broccoli or with some stir-fried greens, or maybe some rice or potatoes as well. And it looks something like this inside, and it's really delicious and creamy, and it's so good. My kids absolutely love this recipe, and there's never a drop left in the dish. So we're actually going to do two recipes together here. We're going to be making our Saviour Scraps chicken broth and our chicken broth soup. So to make the Saviour Scraps chicken broth, you're going to need vegetable scraps. So if you saved your scraps from making your roast chicken, you're going to use those. I've actually got a bag of scraps that I keep in the freezer, and I'll show you in a second. And we keep onion tops, skins, garlic pieces, skins, leek ends, any herbs that are just a little bit past it, any vegetable that is just a little bit past it but that is not moldy, you can use that as well. And you're also going to need your chicken bones, skin and leftovers, so any pieces of meat that are left over, any chicken bones and skin, everything is basically going into this pot, and any leftover cooked vegetables from your roast chicken dinner can go in here as well, and all of the juices that was in the roast chicken tray is going to go in this recipe too, and we're just going to need some water to cover that to make the broth. So once we have made our broth, we are then going to be making our chicken broth. And for the chicken broth, you're going to need a couple of tablespoons of butter or oil, 1 onion chopped, 3 small carrots or 1 large, 4 medium potatoes or 2 large, 1 small neep cubed into small pieces, the chicken stock which we're about to make, and some water to top it up, and some salt and pepper. And if you don't have carrots or potatoes in your kitchen, you could use other vegetables as well, like parsnips, or you could also use some pumpkin. Just any kind of hard vegetable will be suitable for this recipe. So to start off this recipe, we are going to be making our broth. So if you get yourself a large soup pan, and we're going to pop in any of our chicken bones and skin, everything is going in. It's not the prettiest to look at, but it does make a really nice tasty stock. So it's really worthwhile doing this after you have cooked up your chicken. And we're just going to pop in all of our vegetables and any juices from the pan into there as well. And you don't have to do this on the same night you're cooking your roast dinner. You can pop the leftovers in the fridge and do it the next day as well. That also works really well. And we have our bag of scraps here as well. So this is the bag that I was talking about. I keep a bag like this in the freezer with all of my vegetable scraps, which I use for making broth. And it just adds a little bit of extra nutrition into your broth and also flavor as well. So you can use skins and bits of leeks and things, and you can get an idea here of the types of things that I have inside this bag. So we're just going to add in a good few handfuls into our large soup pot. So when I am cutting up vegetables, I will actually just keep a bowl to the side. I'll put all my scraps into that bowl, and then I'll just transfer them into this freezer bag straight after I have finished doing all the meal prep. And it's just such an easy way to save all your vegetable scraps. So we're just going to add in our water here. So I'm just topping it up with jugfuls of water, and we're just basically putting in enough water to fill it right up and over the vegetables. You can also add in a couple of tablespoons of apple cider vinegar if you have that to hand. It's not in my ingredients list, but it is something that does help to extract the nutrition out of the chicken bones apparently. I don't always add it in, but sometimes I do when I have it available. And you can also add in additional herbs here as well. So what we're going to do is bring that up to a boil, and we're then going to drop it to a simmer. And I usually cook mine for about 8 hours for a really good stock. You can go up to 24, even 48 hours if you want a really strong bone broth. But if you're just after a stock for the soup, then 6 to 8 hours is more than enough. I also have another version here which I have done in a slow cooker, which I will put on a slow cooker on high for 8 hours. I don't have as much vegetable scraps in this version, but it's basically done in exactly the same way. Everything's going in with the water topped up, and I just cooked that on for 8 hours. So I'm going to be using this for my recipe today. And with the pan, you're going to drain your stock in exactly the same way as I am going to be draining this slow cooker stock as well. So if you get yourself a large bowl and a sieve and a ladle, and we're just going to pour all of our stock through the sieve, because we don't want any pieces of bones, because everything does kind of come apart when you have this cooking for so long. So you have bones and all sorts of pieces floating about in there. So you really want to drain everything off. So we're just straining all of our stock through here, and you can see all the bones and skin and other lovely things are being caught in that sieve there. And we're just going to pull out enough stock just to make our soup just now. So I have a large bowl here. This is about a litre of stock, or maybe a litre and a half of stock. And we're going to add our butter into our large soup pan. We're just going to melt our butter, and we're going to cook down all of our vegetables for our soup. So we're adding in our onions. And we're just going to give those a stir through. So we're not cooking our vegetables completely, we're actually just cooking them down ever so slightly. So we're adding in our carrots now, and we're just going to stir those through as well. Butternut squash would work really well, pumpkin, as I said before, any type of hard vegetable or a root vegetable would work really well. And we're just going to give that a stir through for a few minutes just to cook down ever so slightly, and it just gives the vegetables such a delicious flavour with the butter. And we're just going to pop in our remaining potatoes there. So once you have all of your vegetables in your pan, you just give it a really good stir through, and the heat that you're looking for here is about a medium-ish heat, and we're just going to season that really well with some salt. And a sprinkle of black pepper. You could also add in some dried herbs as well if you have that to hand, or some fresh herbs if you want to add those into. So I'm just ladling out about a litre of stock here. And we're just going to pop that into our soup. So if that is not enough to cover your vegetables, you might need to top it up with a little bit of water. You just want to make sure that your vegetables are covered with the stock and water. So you just pour it all into your pan and just give it a stir through. So this is a perfect amount of liquid here. As it cooked down, I did add a little bit more just so that the vegetables were covered all the time with liquid. So I added a little bit more water. You could also add a little bit more stock. It doesn't have to be water. Just make sure that your vegetables are covered in a good quantity of liquid. So we're going to bring that to a boil, and then we're going to drop it down to a low to medium simmer, and we're just going to cook that away for about 45 minutes to an hour. And what we're going to do with the rest of the stock is we are going to store the rest in a jar and pop it into the fridge. So if you just continue straining your stock out of your slow cooker or your pan, whichever method you chose to use to create your stock, and just pop it all into your bowl. And you will be left with a little bit of meat because everything falls apart when it's cooking. To make the broth, there are more pieces of meat available for popping into the soup at the end. So if you just pour all of your extra stock into your jug here, and then we are going to pop that into a jug and store it in the fridge. So I tend to store it for a maximum of about 3 days. I think it can actually be kept in your fridge for longer than that, but I tend to use it quite quickly. You don't have to just use this stock for soup. You can also use it for making stews. You can also use it for cooking vegetables, and you can actually also even drink it with salt. Some people do that. I don't personally, but apparently it tastes really nice. So if you pop your lid on and then just leave it to cool before you pop it into your fridge. And you can see as well there is a very small layer of fat on the top of your stock. So if you don't want to use this when you're in your soup, you can actually chill your stock first of all, and then you can take the fat layer off of the stock if you don't want the fat in your soup. But it's a very small layer if you have a really good quality chicken, so I tend to just pop it into the soup because it does add extra flavour. And we're just going to take off any pieces of meat that are left in the bones in the stock. So just leave it to cool before you do this, because it will be hot if you use it immediately after it is ready. We're just going to shred those up into small pieces, and this is just going to be added back into the soup. You might not have a lot of meat, especially not as much as this, because I've kept the wings, and I think I maybe had a little bit of leg left as well. So you might not have as much as this, and that's totally fine. It's just really for a little bit of texture in the soup. So don't worry if you don't have that much left over. But if you pick through those bones, I'm sure you'll be sure to find a good quantity to pop back in. So we're just going to mash the soup down a little bit. You can pop it in the blender if you want it completely smooth. Add a little bit of cream or yogurt to smooth it out even more. I just like the texture when it's slightly mashed, and my kids love it that way. So I like to cook it like this, and it gives your texture something like this. So it's still quite runny, but it does have chunky vegetables in it as well, and they are completely tender by this point as well. They're really nice and soft. So we're just going to add all the chicken back into our pan there. And that is basically it. We're just going to warm up that chicken if it was cold when you were shredding it. Just heat it up for another minute or so, and then it's ready to serve. And you can serve it up with a sprinkle of herbs if you have those available as well. And have a taste of your soup before you serve it, and adjust the seasoning if necessary. So add a little bit more salt and pepper if you need to as well. So I hope you enjoyed making these recipes, and I hope it's inspired you to reduce your own food waste in your own home. It's something that's really close to my heart, so I really enjoyed making these recipes for you. And as I say, you can go on to try and experiment with other leftovers and use them in creative ways as well. Pies and soups are my favourite way of using up leftovers, but we also turn things like bolognese into Mexican food, and there's all sorts of creative things you can do with your leftovers. So it's a really good way to get them out of the bin and just get them onto your plate for another meal. So if you want to find out more about Sustainable Kirriemuir and the projects that they're currently working on, then please pop over to their social media accounts, which I have listed in the description box below, and give them a follow, and you'll be kept up to date with all of their information on there as well. If you need the recipe again, the link will be available on my website. It's angiemilne.com, so if you pop over there, and it will be on the homepage, and you can download the blog link, and it has all 4 recipes in the one blog, so you can print it off, or you can just use your tablet or something in the kitchen to view it on there if you find that easier. And if you enjoyed this recipe, you might also like my free traditional Scottish cookbook. It's available on my website, and you can pop over there, pop in your email address, and it can be sent to your inbox as well. So if you have any further questions, or if you have any suggestions for other leftover recipes, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. And if you took a photo of any of these chicken recipes and you're on Instagram, please feel free to share it on your stories and tag myself, the Wee Larder, and to tag Sustainable Kirriemuir, and we'll both share it on our Instagram pages as well. So we'd love to see your foodie creations. And if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and a like and a share if you want to do that as well. And if you subscribe and hit that little bell next to it, you'll be notified of my new videos coming out in the future. And I have lots of delicious things coming your way now that we're in the middle of spring and we're going to be in summer soon. I can't wait for the summer months. I have so many delicious fruity recipes to share with you all. So I hope you enjoyed this video again. Take care, guys, and I hope to see you all again soon. Lots of love. Bye bye.